It's politics. And let me say up front, I've never been a political animal. I don't really happily regard myself as a political animal, even now, except I have to concede that more and more I'm commenting or finding myself thinking about and talking about things political. So I'm sort of being sucked in. It's been in our faces again. Here in the UK, at least, here in Britain, there's been 3 by-elections. 3 political constituencies were up for grabs, and the usual suspects were falling over one another to try and get their hands on the political turf. And I was actually, for the first time in my life, I was actually at a husting. I'm very pally now, very close with Lawrence Fox, fellow GB News presenter, and he stood with his Reclaim UK party, he stood in the Uxbridge and Ruislip constituency in London. It was Boris Johnson's vacated constituency. Former Prime Minister Boris Johnson, recently disgraced politician Boris Johnson, is now out of the picture in some respects, and into his vacuum was pulled a by-election. It was a great anthropological moment for me. I'd never seen one of those events actually play out. It was very interesting. But when it came to it, when the election actually happened, the by-election happened, there were 17 candidates. Okay, 17 people. Labour and Conservative, between them, took 92% of the vote. And it was a very close run thing. You struggled to slip a cigarette paper between them, but the Conservatives held on to the seat. But 92% of people who bothered to vote at all voted for either Conservative or Labour. And the other 15 candidates, of whom Lawrence was one, shared the remainder. It shared like less than 8% of the vote. Now, to me, a clearer demonstration really of the extent to which politics here and across the West is just broken beyond repair. That's how it seems to me. That's partly why I've kind of tried to keep out of politics, because I think it's just a toxically poisonous goldfish bowl, and anything can survive in that poisoned container is beyond me. However, there we are. And I say that we are ruled, and I choose the word ruled deliberately because those in charge have ceased even to pay lip service to the idea of serving in government. And they now behave as though they are in rulership, like they're little kings and queens of a kingdom. And we're the proles, we're the subjects. And we are ruled by people who openly despise the regular people of the countries in question. I mean, it's not just here in Great Britain, it's all across Europe, and it's in America as well. The people in power increasingly make plain that they think we're scum, that they can just boss around. Here in Britain, at the moment, overall power, is wielded by a nominally Conservative party, right? Now, and the opposition is provided by a nominally Labour Party. And I'm using the word nominally because the names are all that's left of what were once upon a time 2 groups representing 2 different political ideologies. But it's been repeated over and over recently that Labour and Conservative now are just 2 cheeks of the same arse. And if that doesn't translate into the international languages, I would say, and I have said, that it's 2 withered testicles in the same low-hanging scrotal sack. And I say withered because they've got nothing left to give. They are juiceless testicles, just occupying an otherwise empty space. Or else, I suppose, you might say that the 2 dominant parties in Britain, Conservative and Labour, have been taken over in the manner of, what's that film? Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Where the familiar outer shells still look the same. And a casual observer would be forgiven for thinking it's business as usual, that there's 2 different parties here. But it's not. That both, on the inside, have been colonised by the same parasitic zombie ideology. There's 2 parties up and walking about. There's 2 shapes moving through the political landscape. One's coloured red and one's coloured blue. But inside both is a presence given to the undoing and the unmaking of all that was once Britain. Once upon a time, I was certainly tricked into thinking that either or both parties had the greater well-being of Britain and the British close to their heart, that they were just coming at that noble objective from two different directions. I don't think that anymore. And I don't know, in fact, how long it has been untrue. But I say that both of those parties, in every meaningful way, are committed to unmaking what was once Britain. You know, people have voted and still vote Conservative, thinking or believing that they'll get Conservative thinking. Or they vote Labour, believing they'll get Socialist or some version of Socialist thinking. And neither's the case, because those ideologies are gone. They're gone. They're maybe gone forever. Maybe they'll come back, but they're absent now. And what people get, whichever way they vote, are sock puppets. Empty things that are manipulated. And they're manipulated and moved or given the appearance of movement as puppets by the banks, by the markets, by transnational entities. Any and all of which are committed to centralised control. One world government. Government in Britain doesn't make decisions. Government in America doesn't make decisions. Government across Europe doesn't make decisions. They're just mouthing words that are written for them. So when the next general election comes round next year or whatever, I might vote. Although I might vote. But God knows who I'll vote for. This much I say, I will never vote Conservative or Labour again. Never. If I vote, and if is doing a lot of heavy lifting, it'll be for some other. You know, I'll make the point of exercising my right to vote, but it'll be for some independent. Somebody who looks and sounds like they've got some modicum of common sense, at least. And all over the country it's the same. For millions of people, drawing the conclusion that voting has become the definition of a waste of time. If the opinion formers are right, it'll be a Labour government next, nominally. And that means more of what the outgoing Conservatives have been up to, except it'll be more and harder and faster and worse. But it won't be different. You know, all you get to influence at the moment is whether the volume, where the volume control is set at. You know, ear splitting or just deafening. Londoners, right, look at the capital city in Britain. Londoners are up in arms about the ULEZ scheme. That's the ultra low emissions zone, which is abandon your car by any other name. Forget you ever owned a car by any other name. At the moment in London, it's been pushed by the Labour Mayor Sadiq Khan. But Labour don't care what the people want. Labour, in the form of Sadiq Khan in London, wants what Labour and Sadiq Khan wants. You've got Keir Starmer, the nominal leader of the Labour Party for what it matters. He's another sock puppet. And second in command is Angela Rayner. And she's out there making it clear that the ULEZ schemes, the ultra-low emissions zones, aren't just about London. That if and when Labour get into power, they're going to be in every town and city in the land. It's nothing to do with low emissions, you know, cutting the air pollution. It's just about making it impossible for regular working people to be able to afford to drive their cars into the urban areas. That's all it's about. They've just created legislation to force people out of their cars. They've just been told, get the people out of their cars by hook or by crook, and this is what they're doing. Now, that's just the ULEZ scheme. The people of this country, I tell you now, because I'm one of the people of this country, and I talk to a lot of other people of this country, and what the people of this country want is safety and decent lives for their families, for their children, for their grandchildren. They want safe and working national borders, defining where our country ends and other countries begin. Neither the Conservatives nor the Labour Party give a damn about those traditional simple values. Children in primary school now are taught about masturbation and anal sex. And they're taught about how boys might really be girls and girls might really be boys. And parents don't want, and have made it plain they don't want this stuff rammed down their kids' throats. But the state is indifferent to that point of view. The state pushes anything and everything that will divide people, that will keep people anxious and fearful, that will keep people angry with each other, that will keep people on edge. Because, as Tony Benn memorably said, you know, the last thing a domineering government, any government, wants is a happy, healthy, confident, educated population. Because they're hard to govern. What governments want are ill, frightened, submissive, uneducated people who can be told what to do, what to think, where to go and when. Anyone now espousing family values, demanding the protection of their children from offensive indoctrination, is instantly labelled far right. That's where we are now in this country. And it's the same across Europe. Parties in one country after another are standing up, political parties, and speaking out about family and tradition and culture, and they're instantly and automatically labelled far right. And the populations of the countries are being encouraged, if not forced, to shun those parties, because the powers that be do not want anyone standing up for family and culture and borders. Now, in 2016, the referendum in Britain on Brexit, which was, do we stay in the European Union or do we leave? That referendum saw the biggest ever turnout for a vote about anything in British history. The people were motivated as never before to have their voices heard, individually and collectively. And the result, which was a decision to leave Europe, it was clear. It demonstrated that most people who had voted wanted Britain to leave the European Union. And for many people, it was the very first time in their lives that they had felt motivated to vote for something. And how were those voters treated afterwards? And right up to this day, ever since 2016, they were told that their vote marked them out as stupid racists. That's what they were told by the mainstream media, by the intelligentsia, by academia, and by the most vocal of the population within the Parliament, within the House of Commons. They were stupid racists because they had voted as they had. That was the thanks they got for exercising their right to vote. And more of the same followed. A couple of years later, the so-called Red Wall, which is to say that part of the British electorate, particularly in the north of England, that had traditionally voted Labour, which is red, they voted instead, and for the first time, for Boris Johnson's so-called Conservative Party, who were promising to get Brexit done. Okay, and famously, the Red Wall turned blue because it stopped being a Labour wall and became a predominantly Conservative for the first time. And having voted, those people who turned against lifetimes of traditional voting patterns and tried something different because they were voting for someone who said he wanted to get Brexit done, they were made to experience in living technicolor the reality of having been lied to. Because they were lied to. Because Brexit, all those years later, and despite clear votes in a referendum and then in a general election, Brexit remains undone. And Brexit will never be done. It'll never happen because those who believe they know best and who never relinquish power, whether or not there's a general election, they think the people who made those votes, who cast those votes, are fit for nothing but being utterly disregarded. They think it doesn't matter what these people think. It doesn't matter what the people think, full stop, because they're stupid and they're racist. That's the opinion that is manifest amongst the powers that be. And if the powers that be had set out to show the people that voting was pointless, then they couldn't have done a better job than was done between the 2016 referendum on Brexit and then the general election. They couldn't have done a better job of showing people that their vote was meaningless and pointless. And it's the same in the United States of America. The same year Britain voted for Brexit, 2016, the US voted for Donald Trump as president. And the powers that be in America weren't having that either. And they spent the Trump presidency trying to smear him as some sort of traitor. The whole thing. They turned on him and went after him like a pack of dogs. And people who voted for Trump and who plan to vote for him again are baited as hicks and rubes and rednecks. Stupid and racist. It's the same playbook. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I don't believe we'd have had a pandemic if the United States had voted for Hillary Clinton and Britain had voted to stay in Europe. I don't believe the past 3 years would have unfolded as they have, including war in Ukraine and the cycling hysteria about the so-called climate crisis. I don't believe any of that would have happened if America had voted for Clinton and the Brits had voted to stay in Europe. What we got in the aftermath, what the world got in the aftermath of those decisions by the people was a punishment beating. That's what the last 3 years have been, a punishment beating for people who took a last valiant chance at changing the status quo. You see what they got for it. Now, Robert Kennedy Jr., he's dominating the polls in the United States at the moment, and he is excoriatingly critical of Democrat and Republican alike. And a vast swathe of the American public already loves him. They love him for it. And what are the powers that be doing in response? They're ripping into him. And the media's at it as well, again. They're ripping into him as though he were some sort of dangerous extremist. When for the most part, he just challenges dishonesty, he challenges corruption, and for a long time, he wants questions answered about the extent to which American babies and children are vaccinated, and with what. That's what he's about. So I say again, politics is broken beyond repair. People all across the West want what decent, regular people everywhere always want, which is a safe, clean place in which to raise a family. That's it. And too many politicians want no such thing for them. Those politicians are the zombie product of the takeover and hollowing out of any of the values that their respective parties once claimed to stand for. And I say that what's needed is a whole new way, a whole new movement, a revolution by those who care about their families and their countries. Oh, and one last thing, there's no climate crisis either, so enjoy what you can of the summer, wherever the sun is shining.